This may be the two best super heavyweights in the world.
This is Denis Cyplenkov, one of the strongest and most legendary arm wrestlers to have ever graced the sport. And on the other side is a retired old man who's coming back from retirement after nearly 2 decades of inactivity from the sport. But how is this possible? Well, you see, calling him a retired old man would probably be the understatement of the century. As you can probably already tell, this isn't just any old man. This is none other than Richard Lupkes, also known as the Leviathan. And trust me, he didn't get that nickname for nothing. Richard Lupkes has multiple legendary wins against some of arm wrestling's biggest names, like Travis Bagent, Tim Brennan, and John Brezink multiple times, with most of these victories taking place when Richard was already in his 50s. So if he was able to defeat all of these legends even in his older age, then how strong must he have been in his prime? Richard's journey begins all the way back in 1974 in a small tournament in high school where he would be introduced to arm wrestling. Then, from 1975 to 1976, he would compete in multiple more local competitions and stack on victories, such as winning the South Dakota State Championship. However, in 1978, he would step onto the big stage for the first time, winning second place in the WPAA World Championships and do so again in the following year as well. From this point on, there would be a small break in his arm wrestling career before returning in 1985 for the Over the Top tournament, which was the largest arm wrestling tournament yet at the time. He would easily win the Chicago qualifiers, then move on to the finals in 1986. There, he would win third place after exhausting himself against Ed Arnold Jr. before losing to none other than the rising arm wrestling legend, John Brezink. However, he would earn his redemption just 2 years later, winning consecutive world titles in 1988 and 1989, which included taking his revenge on John Brezink. This was Richard in his prime, who was absolutely running through everyone and weighing up to 134 kilos, or around 295 pounds. Unfortunately, Richard would suffer an injury in the form of a torn rotator cuff in 1990, while competing in the finals against John Brezink once more at the Yukon Jack Nationals. Regrettably, this would be the start of a long retirement from arm wrestling, as Richard would step away from arm wrestling for nearly 2 decades, though he did continue general strength training even as the years passed. Then, in 2007, after 17 years of inactivity from arm wrestling, Richard would return for the Kansas USAF Nationals to take third place in the Open Division and first place in the Grandmasters Heavyweight Division. Then, in the following year, he would also compete in the Arnold Classic Tournament, where he would defeat more legends in Tim Brennan and John Brezink again. But unfortunately for him, he would suffer another injury again at the Unified Nationals in Salt Lake City against Tim Brennan in the form of a severe bicep tear. Luckily, Richard would return from his injury in 2009, where he would beat Nick Zena 3-0 for the top roll heavyweight title, then proceed to win the Unified Nationals in the Open, Masters, and Grandmasters heavyweight divisions. In 2010, he would also have a repeat victory in both the Open and Grandmasters super heavyweight divisions at the Unified Nationals again, before moving on to WAF and winning the Grandmasters division there as well. Later on, he would also go on to face the current world number 1 at the time, Devin Larratt, who would be the only person that would defeat Richard Lupkes that year. Then, in 2011, he would face another legend in Travis Bagent at the Ultimate Arm Wrestling League, who he would ultimately defeat in the finals to take the super heavyweight title. But more importantly, it gave us one of the most epic moments in all of arm wrestling history.
Stand up! Stand up so I can win! Stand up! Stand up, Rich! Stand up, Rich! I'ma bust that hand back! Stand up! Stand up, bigot! I'ma bust that hand back soon as you stand up! Stand up, Rich! Stand up, Rich! Yeah!
A few moments later.
Go! No! No!
Then, in the March of 2011, Richard would return to the Arnold Classic, which brings us back to the present day where he would meet the rising legend of Denis Cyplenkov. At the ripe middle age of 54, Richard faced off against the 29-year-old Denis Cyplenkov, with a 25-year age gap in between the two. Outside of the straps, Richard hits first and Denis decides to go into the hook. Denis hits back hard, but Richard stops his hit and continues to grind through Cyplenkov. When Richard stands up, Denis hits one more time but is unable to maintain a position on the winning side. Richard then continues with multiple smaller surges while Denis holds on for dear life. Eventually, Denis is able to get the slip, but we can clearly see the surprise on his face, as he certainly didn't expect Richard to be as strong as he was. Denis would later himself admit that he had certainly underestimated his opponent, who he had originally compared with Michael Todd.
Я наверное, не готов был к Лупкасу. Почему-то мне казалось, что с ним будет проще побороться. Настраивался, наверное, на Майкла Тодда, потому что там по выносливости я понимал, что нужно будет собраться. А Чаффи на тот момент, он был послабей, я его в расчет не брал, по-честному, да. И получилось то, что я недооценил Лупкаса. То есть Тодда я в расчет не беру, я понимал то, что он крепкий, с ним придется потаскаться, а там как пойдет. А Лупкаса я, недооценил.
Now, returning to the match in the straps, Richard hits first again, but this time, Denis doesn't underestimate him and surges aggressively in the hook multiple times. However, it still isn't enough and Richard continues to pressure Cyplenkov. When Richard stands up, Denis smartly hits hard, but is called for the elbow foul. On the restart, Richard once again hits first and Denis is forced into a defensive position. However, at this point, Richard starts to tire out and Denis's superior endurance kicks in, allowing him to retake the position and eventually pin Lupkes. At the end, we see Denis paying huge respect to his opponent, clearly acknowledging Richard's unbelievable strength even in his older age. Later on, Denis would also speak about how tough of an opponent Lupkes was, as well as his expectations headed into the match.
Ричард, ему не соперник, он легко с ним разберется, Люк, у меня сильнее. Поэтому я эти слова тоже где-то в какой-то момент тоже вспомнил и думал, что и я такой встал с ним, понимаю, что, он даже не сопротивляется. И когда пошел старт, мы просто без всяких лишних движений эмоций закручиваемся в крюк. И тут я понимаю, что вся эта масса, которая есть, угол, все, он сильнее, чем у меня. Он забирает у меня середину, атакует, и я такой, у меня аж искры в глазах, посыпались. Я тут уже начинаю перестраиваться, что-то пытаться делать, и уже поздно, потому что он закрутился. Он закрутился, но он сильнее. Моя задача была держать. То есть держать, пытаться передержать. Собственно, что я и сделал, да. То есть у нас поединок длился у меня.
Denis would also further reflect on the match itself, admitting that going into the hook with Lupkes was a mistake that almost cost him the match, and that his superior endurance was the ultimate deciding factor.
Только в том, что я, был уверен, что зайдя в крюк, я его легко одолею, как я это делал с другими, да, спортсменами. И я зашел туда целенаправленно сам. То есть надо было ему не давать туда зайти. То есть надо было натянуть и не давать. Перетерпел, передержал. Но можно было, наверное, поликратно говорил, он очень сильный. У него очень сильный бицепс. То есть задача не дать ему туда зайти. Если он туда зашел, просто... то есть если сейчас сравнивать, Чаффи. Чаффи, крюк очень сильный. и Лупкаса. Ну просто Лупкас уже возраст какой, поэтому я не ожидал от такого деда, в хорошем смысле этого слова, такой мощи.
Now, while this wasn't exactly Denis in his prime, this also wasn't a rookie Denis like the one that John defeated back in 2009. In fact, Denis had already gotten his revenge on John just the year before in 2010 and was likely a top 3 arm wrestler by the time he faced Richard in 2011. Even if you say that Denis was still 3 years away from his true prime in 2014, you also have to remember that Richard himself was literally not years, but decades away from his own prime. In fact, he's even stated himself that he was much stronger in his actual prime decades ago.
I had to compare myself to when I was 25 years younger. I was a lot stronger back then. I'm actually a little bit heavier right now. I weighed about 295 back then, but my strength was a lot more. And I'm 55 years old, so age catches up a little bit, but I still enjoy the sport and meeting new people and pulling guys, so it's still a lot of fun.
In the following years after the Cyplenkov match, Richard would continue to compete a bit more, finishing second in the United Nationals behind Jerry Cadaret in 2012 and going on to win the Grandmasters division. He would also go back to the Arnold Classic to take home 3rd place in 2013 and return to the Nationals to win 1st place in the open weight on the right and Grandmasters division on both the right and left arms. Unfortunately, Richard would stay away from competitive arm wrestling after having surgery on both wrists for carpal tunnel syndrome during the lead up to the pandemic. Though he never fully quit, seeing as he would continue to arm wrestle even up until 2019. And from what I could find, he was also set to have a match against Chance Shaw in 2023 at Michael Todd's Monster Factory 4, but was forced to pull out due to a back injury. And tragically, on August 2nd of 2024, Richard's fiancée, Shirley Lupkes, would pass away after a hard-fought battle with a cancerous tumor. Unfortunately, to this day, Richard hasn't truly returned to the world of competitive arm wrestling. As of 2026, he is nearly 70 years old, and his days of standing across the table from the world's strongest pullers appear to be behind him. Yet despite his absence from competition, he has no doubt earned the respect of many legendary arm wrestlers, from Denis Cyplenkov,
Поэтому вот он в этом плане, конечно, молодец. Как-то чисто по-человечески, да, так с уважением относится ко мне. Но я это оценил.
to Devin Larratt.
I think that Richard Lupkes, when he was the #1 guy, is probably the most dominant. Like, he had the most, like, between him and the #2 was probably the biggest space when he was like his best form. The Richard Lupkes that I know personally is the most mild-mannered, polite gentleman, giant that you've ever met. Couldn't find a nicer guy. Still at his age, he has so much strength, but he's limited by injuries.
Overall, Richard Lupkes remains one of arm wrestling's most enduring legends. His battles against John Brzezinski stand as a testament to an era when two of the strongest men on the planet fought for supremacy at the table. He may no longer compete, but his legacy lives on through the victories he earned, the rivals he conquered, and the stories that continue to be told decades later. For as long as arm wrestlers gather around the table, the legend of Richard Lupkes will never be far behind.